Ambassador Kalen of the Vexian Concordance adjusted his crystalline monocle, a gesture of profound unease. Before him, Ambassador Thorn of the Terran Accord sat slumped in a chair that had been reshaped to accommodate his bipedal form, a mug of something hot and brown steaming in his hands. The chamber was a masterpiece of engineered silence, its walls absorbing sound, its air scrubbed of all but the most necessary frequencies. The Vexians, beings of pure sonic resonance, could not comprehend the chaotic vibrations humans called laughter. To them, it was a biological malfunction, a sign of a mind unmoored from logic. Thorn had just made a joke about a malfunctioning nutrient dispenser. Kalen had nearly short-circuited his own vocal synthesizer in an effort to maintain diplomatic decorum. He watched the human's face, a landscape of fleshy folds and expressive creases, searching for the telltale signs of impending mirth. He found them. A twitch at the corner of the mouth, a slight narrowing of the eyes. Kalen braced himself, his entire being coiled tight as a spring, preparing for the sonic assault that would surely shatter the delicate peace talks. He had studied human physiology for a decade, yet the unpredictable nature of their emotional outbursts remained his greatest professional terror. The silence stretched, taut and thin, and Kalen knew with a certainty that chilled his core that the coming sound would be the end of everything. The sound, when it came, was not the catastrophic shriek Kalen had imagined. It was a low, rumbling vibration that built in the human's chest and escaped in a series of sharp, percussive bursts. Huh, huh, huh. It was a sound that seemed to defy the laws of physics, a chaotic pattern that somehow resolved into something pleasant. Kalen felt a strange resonance in his own sonic chambers, a frequency he had never before encountered. It was disarming, this human humor. It bypassed all his logical defenses and struck something primal within him. Thorn, oblivious to the internal crisis he had provoked, leaned forward, his eyes crinkling at the corners. "See? Harmless," he said, his voice warm. Kalen managed a series of carefully modulated clicks in response, his standard diplomatic placation. But the damage was done. The joke, the laughter, the sheer absurdity of it all had created a crack in the Vexian's perfect, ordered mind. He would report this, of course. The Concordance needed to be aware of this terrifying new variable in their dealings with these volatile, unpredictable creatures from the galactic rim. They called themselves humans. Kalen was beginning to understand why they had been so isolated for so long. They were a walking, talking paradox, and paradoxes, by their very nature, were unstable. The peace talks were a fragile construct, built on a foundation of shared threats and mutual distrust. The true enemy was not the Terrans, nor the Vexians, but the mycelial collective, a voracious fungal intelligence that consumed worlds, turning planets into silent, chitinous husks. They spread through spore-laden nebulae, their advance a creeping rot that had consumed 12-star systems in the last cycle. The Concordance and the Accord were the last two major powers standing in their path, and they could not agree on a strategy. The Vexians advocated for a preemptive, sterilizing strike on a newly infested nursery world, a solution that was logically sound but morally abhorrent to the humans. Thorn argued for containment, for finding a weakness, for saving what could be saved. The stalemate was absolute, a wall of stubborn principle that the mycelial collective was all too happy to let stand. Kalen watched Thorn argue his case, his voice rising with a passion that was, to the Vexians, completely irrational. The human's attachment to life, even fungal life, was a baffling emotional anchor that prevented him from seeing the bigger picture. Kalen knew the calculus of survival, and it did not include sentiment. Yet, as Thorn spoke, Kalen felt that strange resonance again, the one left behind by the human's laughter. It was a faint, insistent hum in the back of his mind, a reminder that logic was not the only tool one could use to build a bridge. The decision was made. The Vexian fleet would move to sterilize the nursery world, designated Kepler 186F. The Terran fleet, in a gesture of symbolic defiance, would move to blockade the system. They would not fire on the Vexians, but they would not allow the sterilization to proceed. It was a childish, emotional gambit, and Kalen had filed it under Terran Irrationality number 742. He stood on the bridge of his flagship, the resonance of silence, watching the tactical display. Two fleets, two ideologies, one doomed world. The mycelial collective's presence was a sickly green smear across the holographic projection, pulsing with malevolent intent. They were waiting. They wanted the two powers to destroy each other. Kalen felt a cold dread seep into his sonic core. He had spent his life pursuing order, and now he was hurtling towards a beautiful, chaotic collision. He remembered Thorn's laughter, a sound that had shattered his composure, but somehow, in the memory of it, felt like a promise. A promise of what, he did not know. But the promise was there, and it was the only thing that felt real in this increasingly unreal situation. The blockade was a silent, tense affair. Human and Vexian ships drifted in the void, a stark contrast of sleek, angular metal and organic, crystalline forms. No shots had been fired, but the atmosphere was thick with unspoken threats. On the bridge of the UNS Odyssey, Captain Eva Rostova stood beside Ambassador Thorn. Her face was a mask of grim determination, but her eyes held a deep, weary sadness. "They won't back down, Ambassador," she said, her voice low. "And we can't let them do what they're planning. Not to a world that might still have something alive on it." Thorn nodded, his gaze fixed on the Vexian flagship. "I know, Eva. I know." He wasn't just thinking about the potential life on the planet. He was thinking about the Vexians. He had seen the flicker of something in Kalen's sonic patterns during their last meeting, something other than cold logic. He had to believe it was still there. He had to believe that a connection, however fragile, could be forged in the crucible of this impossible choice. He thought of Kalen's monocle, the way it had trembled when he laughed. He thought of the sound itself, a weapon of mass destruction that had somehow become an olive branch. The mycelial collective attacked, not with a fleet, but with a wave. A silent, invisible tide of spores that washed over the blockade, seeking to infiltrate and convert the ships. It was a perfect, insidious weapon, and it worked. Vexian ships, their crystalline hulls porous to the microscopic invaders, began to change. Their bioluminescent lights flickered and died, replaced by a sickly, chitinous glow. The air on board filled with the sound of cracking and reshaping as the fungal network rewrote the very structure of the vessels. The humans fared little better. Their advanced filtration systems were overwhelmed, and crew members began to succumb to the spores, their bodies becoming hosts for the collective's consciousness. The blockade was collapsing, not from weapons fire, but from a rot that consumed from within. On the bridge of the Odyssey, Eva Rostova fought off the effects of the spores, her vision swimming. "Ambassador," she gasped, "the network is trying to interface with our systems. It's using our own communication protocols." Thorn saw the truth then. The collective wasn't just an enemy. It was a parody of communication. It absorbed, it mimicked, it consumed all signals, all connections, all bonds. It was the ultimate anti-diplomat, a being that understood only assimilation. And in that moment, Thorn knew what he had to do. He had to use the one thing the collective could not comprehend, a joke. Kalen watched in horror as his ship was consumed. The resonance of silence was dying, its perfect sonic architecture being replaced by the collective's discordant chittering. He was being subsumed, his consciousness being pulled apart and reassembled into a node in the fungal network. He could feel the minds of a billion other beings, all screaming in a silent, psychic agony. He felt the loss of self, the dissolution into a single, hateful purpose. And then, a new signal. It was weak, chaotic, and utterly illogical. It was human. It was Ambassador Thorn. The signal was not a command, not a weapon, not a plea for mercy. It was a story. A simple, absurd story about a nutrient dispenser, a malfunctioning one, and the ridiculous things it produced. Kalen, deep within the collective's hive mind, felt a flicker of something. A memory. The sound of laughter. It was a sound of chaos, yes, but it was also a sound of connection. It was a sound that said, "I am here, and you are here, and this shared moment of absurdity is real." The collective, a network built on pure logic and assimilation, could not process this. The illogical, the absurd, the purely emotional was a virus to its system. And Thorn's story, his joke, was the most potent virus imaginable. Kalen felt the network's grip on his mind loosen, just for a second. He focused on that memory, on that sound, and he pushed. He poured his entire being, his last shred of Vexian identity, into that single, chaotic frequency. He laughed. The sound echoed through the collective's hive mind, a sound of pure, unadulterated absurdity. It was a sound that shattered galaxies.